Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 22nd, 2023 public hearing and regular board meeting of the Board of Water Supply. The public hearing will be held first, and then we'll proceed to our regular meeting. I'd like to go over some virtual meeting regulations required by law. Board members attending any board meeting remotely must be visible to the public to be considered present and meet quorum guidelines. Board members participating remotely must also disclose their location and anyone present at their location during roll call. The public is invited to attend our meeting today at our BWS Public Service Building located at 630 South Veritania Street here in Honolulu. We also have this live streaming via interactive conference technology. Madam, roll call. Let's take a moment to take a roll call of the board members.
Thank you, Chair. Board Member Max Sword.
Here.
Board Member Naleku Anthony.
Here.
Board Member Jonathan Kanashiro.
Here.
Board Member Edwin Sniffen.
Here, working from home, just got back from Seattle, make sure I don't pass anything on to anybody. And nobody else is in the room.
Thank you. Board Member Warren Mamizuka.
Here, working out of my Kapolei office. No one is presently in the room with me.
Thank you. And Chair Brandon Tayo.
Present. For all of you who are calling or video conferencing in, please mute your microphone when you're not speaking. If you should have a question, comment, or wish to enter a motion or second a motion on an action item, or if you want to make a comment or want to applaud something or someone, please unmute your microphone and identify yourself before continuing to speak. If you encounter technical issues at any time during today's meeting, please use the chat to send a direct message to our support team. Their names are listed in a message to all the participants. To open the chat window, please click or tap on the text bubble icon toolbar. In the room with us today, I'd like to recognize Manager Ernest Lau.
Hello, everybody.
Deputy Manager Erwin Kawata.
Here.
Board Secretary Joy Cruz Achu.
Here.
Manager Secretary Kimberly Huaye.
Here.
Information Specialist Stephen Norstrop.
Here.
Also joining us by Zoom are Jeff Lau and Jessica Wong, both from the City and County Corporation Council Department. We also have present Information Specialist Wayne Maria. Testimony for today's meeting was being accepted and continues to be accepted. Written testimony has been received and was available. Oral testimony will also be accepted remotely and in person during today's meeting. Pre-registration is encouraged to facilitate as much remote and in-person testimony as reasonably possible during the time allotted. Testifiers should also submit a written version of their oral testimony. To testify remotely by phone or video using the Zoom video conferencing platform, please submit your request via email to board@hbws.org or online through our website at boardofwatersupply.com/testimony. Zoom registration instructions as well as participant guidelines will be sent to the contact information provided. You also may testify in person here in our public service building at 630 Veritania Street. And there is someone downstairs, check in with building security and with testimony staff located in the lobby. Testifiers will be escorted to and from the boardroom. On-site registration is available for walk-in requests. As a friendly reminder, testifiers, you will have 2 minutes to state your position. A timekeeper will alert you when you have 1 minute and then 30 seconds, and will also ring 30 seconds, every 30 seconds after that to remind you that your time is up. Meeting materials or the board packet under HRS section 92-7.5 are accessible at our website, www.boardofwatersupply.com/board meeting. Also on our website, you can view this meeting here today via live streaming on www.boardofwatersupply.com/live. The video player will appear on screen. You may have to click the arrow on video to start it. You also may have to unmute the audio, as muted audio tends to be the default setting. Before today's public hearing, I'd like to state that this board is dedicated to providing safe, dependable, and affordable water supply of water now and into the future. For today's public hearing, the Honolulu Board of Water Supply's public hearing was published in the Thursday, May 11th, 2023 issue of the Star Advertiser. The purpose of this public hearing is to allow the public the opportunity to testify on the proposed fiscal year 2023-2024 operating and capital improvement program budget for the Board of Water Supply. I'd like now to introduce Manager and Chief Engineer Ernest Lau to give a brief overview of the proposed budget.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, I'm going to turn it over to Raylin Nakabayashi, Head of our Executive Support Office, to do a short presentation on the budget in the interest of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. So, as Chair said, the Board of Water Supply does embrace its mission of Water for Life, or Kawaiola, to provide safe, dependable, and affordable water supply now and into the future. While we weather uncertain times due to the Red Hill bulk fuel storage facility contamination, a slowing local economy, and national and international economic instability, the fiscal year 24 operating and capital improvement program budgets are lean and remain focused on our core mission. So our operating budget as proposed is just shy of 1.9% higher than the fiscal year 23 adopted budget. And the capital improvement program budget is proposed at $212,646,000, or 15% higher than the prior year. So presented here are fiscal years 20 through 24's operating and capital improvement program budgets. Our operating budgets have consistently grown due to increases in personnel costs, material supplies and services, and the additional debt service costs from our bond issuances. The increase in fiscal year 24, though, is primarily due to increases in personnel costs driven by collective bargaining, salary increases, fixed costs like electricity, and those increasing debt service costs. Our CIP budgets over the years have also steadily increased as we work to achieve our water master plan goals and as we contend with Red Hill. So the proposed operating budget is based on total operating fund resources of $292.9 million. Operating fund resources are essentially made up of our beginning fund balance, plus revenues, plus any prior year lapses or adjustments. So unfortunately, inflation has outpaced our current rates and effectively reducing our carryover each year. Carryover is simply the unbudgeted and unreserved cash amount remaining at the end of each fiscal year. The fiscal year 24 budget further reduces carryover going forward to meet the challenges we face this fiscal year, including that increased inflation, energy costs, and supply chain issues. This slide illustrates our total operating fund resources versus those total operating fund expenditures. Resources are made up of that column to the left, which is made up of blue, which are the revenues, green, which is the fund balance, and orange, which are lapses and adjustments of prior years. Expenditures are represented in the column to the right in purple. Fiscal years 21 and 22 are represented as actuals, while fiscal years 23 and 24 in this green are the budgeted amounts. As you can see here, inflationary pressures are forcing us to spend into our carryover, or that the green, each year, or that carryover is also considered our working capital. As this board may recall, one of the purposes of the working capital reserve was a rate stabilization fund. This has allowed us to stabilize our rates during the pandemic and ensuing economic challenges. So these board financial policies were adopted by the board, the debt service coverage ratio and the net working capital. As of the audited financial statements for fiscal year 22, these were the amounts. So 4.31 times senior debt coverage, 3.16 times all debt. And our working capital at the end of fiscal year 22 is at 115 days. So this slide presents our annual operating fund expenditures from fiscal years 20 to 22 and actuals, and the operating fund expenditures for fiscal year 23 and 24, budgeted amounts. You'll notice the operating funded CIP expenditures, which are represented on this slide in gray, were higher in prior years than they are now. This is reflective of what we discussed on the prior slide with that working capital or the operating cash kind of being reduced year over year. So there's less operating funds to fund our implementation of the Water Master Plan. And it's also reflective of the challenges that we've faced over the last few years, increasing inflation in Red Hill. Our long-range financial plan always planned the use of a mixture of both bonds and operating funds to finance continued investment in our water system. And we'll continue this mix of bonds and operating funds as we move forward. And that mixture of debt with cash is reflected in the growing debt service cost, which is shown in blue on this slide. So you see debt service has also grown over the years. So on this slide, if you just kind of focus in on 23 and 24 budgets, you'll notice that the only areas of increase over the prior year are in fixed charges, debt service, and personnel, all of which we would consider to be our non-discretionary costs. To accommodate those increases, BWS did have to reduce and control spending where it could, and that was material, supplies, and services, equipment, and also how much operating fund we could contribute to the CIP. So this is just a pie chart representation of the fiscal year 24 budget, operating fund budget. So we've got the $276.4 million of operating funds to be appropriated are split across $83 million for material, supplies, and services, $63.9 million for fixed charges, $53.9 million for personnel services, $38.2 million for debt service, $34.7 million of operating funds to be used on the CIP side to fund projects in the capital improvement program budget, and just $2.6 million for equipment. So if we remove the amount of operating funds we're using in the CIP and we just compare operating expenditures to operating expenditures last year to this year, there's only a 1.9% increase or $4.5 million over the prior year. And like I said on the other slide, the only categories that are growing on our operating budget are fixed charges, which has grown by about 7.4% or $4.4 million. Debt service, which has grown by 10.8% or $3.7 million. And personnel services, which has grown by 4.9% or $2.5 million. All of these are our non-discretionary costs, and to achieve a flat budget in the face of these types of non-discretionary increases, it did mean we did have to trim our operating budget where we could. And considering the increases in non-discretionary costs, an increase of just 1 or less than 2% is essentially a flat budget. And a flat budget in this type of inflationary environment where everything is costing more is actually a smaller budget that's being proposed for fiscal year 24. So now we can get into the highlights of the operating budget or the different cost categories. So personnel costs or salaries expected to increase by about $2.5 million. There is no net increase in full-time equivalent employees of the board. We keep our department staffing below the authorized 741 FTEs. This budget proposes to abolish 2 FTEs while creating 2 water service investigators in our leak detection team. As I believe this board has heard before on presentations about our satellite leak detection pilot program, and now it's something we've established as more permanently, those positions would join that team, the leak detection team. to help maximize our use of this kind of innovative technology, to identify leaks that can be repaired in the system, ideally before they become catastrophic main breaks. And moving on to highlights in our materials, supplies, and our materials, services, and supplies. This is an area where there was a decrease. So we decreased the budget here by about 4.2% or $3.7 million. And this was primarily a reduction in funding for professional services and other contractual services. Our equipment budget was reduced by about half, $2.5 million decrease over the prior year. And it's essentially a decrease in the purchase of new fleet vehicles. And there was a cyclical or one-time funding project in IT that was in fiscal year 23 that is not budgeted again in fiscal year 24. This slide also covers the debt service category. So there's a $3.7 million or 10.8% increase in debt service. That is primarily the increase in principal and interest payments on our bonds and a small amount increase in our SRF payments. While we have been issuing more debt, I feel it is kind of important, though, to say that we have been able to achieve good financing rates. This year, we received AAA ratings from both Fitch and S&P with stable outlook from both raters. This is the third year we've got the AAA from S&P, but the first we got the AAA from Fitch. They upgraded us from AA plus this past year, in February of 2023. On average, a AAA borrower pays about 20 basis points or 0.2% interest less than a AA borrower. So this year, CIP proposes an issuance of $50 million in revenue bonds. That's about $100,000 in annual interest savings. So moving on to fixed charges, they will be increasing by $4.4 million or about 7.5%. This is primarily due to an increase in the amount budgeted for electricity. The increase in electricity was about $5.4 million, and that's slightly offset by a decrease in the amount we need to fund for our employee benefits, ERS, health, and health benefits for both employees and retirees. And I just wanted to acknowledge the board did ask us for a presentation on the power cost adjustment, which we will agenda and present to the board in June. Revenue highlights. So that's the expenditure part of the budget proposed. The revenue side, we're projecting to increase our revenue by about $4.5 million or 1.7%. Metered water revenues are projected to slightly increase due to hopefully our projected rate adjustments scheduled for the second half of fiscal year 2024. So hopefully in effect by January 1st, 2024. Other revenue sources are projected to decrease by about $900,000, and it's primarily due to an increase in interest income. This is what the revenue projections look like numerically. So our largest revenue category, right, is the metered sales of water. That is going up very slightly, offset by a small decrease in our other revenues. For a total revenue projection for fiscal year 24 of $263,060,000. Okay, this is a bar or stacked bar graph of how these revenues stack up year over year. So we've got on this screen 2021 budgeted versus actual, 22 budgeted versus actual, and the current year, fiscal year 23 budget versus where we estimate will end up by June of this year. And then the 24 budget and how that all stacks up next to each other. As I mentioned on the prior slide, our revenues are mostly almost entirely generated from the meter sales of potable, non-potable, and recycled waters. Our water revenues are greatly affected by use and weather. So our forecasted revenues for fiscal year 24 are based on the historical patterns of revenue of prior years and the increase in rates that we're tentatively planning for January 1st, 2024. Okay, so while operating fund revenues are projected to increase by 1.7%, our operating fund expenses inclusive of the operating funds that will be used in the CIP, are projected to decrease by more at about a 4.6% reduction. Or our fiscal year 2024 budgets, we believe, strike that careful balance as we wait for our new revenue or our new rate schedule to be implemented. We are focused on our mission, safe, dependable, and affordable. And while we focus on that, we are contending though with pressures that drive the cost of service up, fixed costs like electricity, Red Hill, and just overall inflation. And from here, I will turn it over to JD to give you some more details on the capital spend.
If I can just add to what Ray just said, that we're sort of between rate increases. So we had our last rate increase that was adopted originally back in 2018, on July 1st of last year. So until the board takes an action to adopt a new set of rate increases over a scheduled period of time, like 5 years, our revenue is going to stay primarily kind of flat. So we took an effort to look at a very lean budget to try to balance it with the expected revenue we're going to get until the new rate increases actually take effect. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is J.D. Lorasaki, head of our Capital Projects Division, our acting program administrator.
Thank you, Ernie. Thank you, Raylan. Good afternoon, Chair, Andaya, and board members. The annual capital improvement program is our commitment to the future of the water system. The annual program is compiled by our office, the Capital Projects Division, and includes projects from all division and staff offices. The capital improvement program supports the department's vision and mission and is aligned with our water master plan, our department's strategic plan, our department's goals and objectives in support of these plans, and our 6-year capital improvement program. The capital improvement program carefully balances the needs of the system in providing safe, reliable water service with cost-effective management of assets and funding. The capital improvement program is comprised of 3 project categories: research and development, renewal and replacement, and our capacity expansion. At this time, I will turn it over again to Raylan to go over our funding initiatives for this fiscal year 2024.
So just before JD gets into all of the details, I wanted to go over kind of the breakdown of how the CIP budget in front of you. So the CIP budget is $212,646,000. The 3 categories that JD mentioned: research and development, renewal and replacement, and capacity expansion. But how that gets funded is broken down into operating funds, state revolving fund loans, the special expendable fund, which is our, I guess what you would call our impact fees. The revenue to the special expendable fund comes from our water systems facility charge and is used exclusively for expansion to the system. Our improvement fund, and then what I'm really going to cover next is the extramural fund. So we budgeted $10 million in the extramural fund, and that was for the amount appropriated in House Bill 300 for the BWS, and that's $10 million of state general obligation bonds. And that $10 million is for projects numbers 1 and 2 in the research and development category. We also budgeted $5.1 million in extramural, and I'm sorry, on the 2 slides ago, I should have explained what extramural is. That is where we put funding that is given to us and controlled by agreement, whether that be a grant agreement or some other type of, it's not free or operating money. This is money that is intended for a specific purpose. So funds like what I just talked about, the money that's coming from the state, in their budget bill, they made clear what the money was for: monitoring and exploratory wells for Wahoo, so that we put the money in extramural fund and it will be expended only for that purpose.
But basically, it's funding from outside sources of funds.
Yes, the extramural fund is,
Water rate.
yes, as money that we obtain outside by agreement, and we will spend the money for its designated purpose. So we've also budgeted $5.1 million in the extramural fund, and this is in anticipation For congressionally directed spending, or what used to be called earmarks, it's a federal appropriation for a Kahilinai Place and Aiea Heights Drive Water System Improvements Project. You'll also notice that we did budget potential BWS funds. So if that does not materialize, if the feds don't pass that appropriation, we intend to fund this project by obtaining a state revolving fund loan. There is 3.3 million budgeted extramural in anticipation, again, for a congressionally directed spending appropriation, and this is for our Honolulu District 42-inch mains project. Again, we wait for the federal government to get through their budget process. If it happens, then we'll use the congressionally directed spending appropriation to finance the project. If not, we will sell revenue bonds to pursue this project. And that's the BWS funds also budgeted in improvement funds. And finally, there's $25 million budgeted for the Kaliloa Seawater Desalination Facility. That's project number 40 in the CIP program today. That is the amount awarded in state and local fiscal recovery funds from the city's share of the American Rescue Plan Act funding that came through to the city. This 25 million is in addition to what you see 35 million of our own BWS funding from our special expendable fund. And now I will turn it back over to JD.
Before JD goes on, I'm going to just add a few comments and acknowledgements. I just want to acknowledge our state legislature, the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate for allocating the $10 million for the exploratory well and monitor wells in response to Red Hill. Those are general obligation bonds that are not an obligation for the BWS customers to repay. So just a big mahalo to our state legislature. And also mahalo to our congressional delegation for being willing to put proposed funding projects in there for the different community-based projects that they are supporting. So both the senators and the congressmen in Congress. So mahalo to them too. And lastly, acknowledgement of our mayor and our Honolulu City Council. You saw the $25 million in American Rescue Plan monies. Those are federal funds that are not an obligation for BWS to repay. That's in addition to the $25.3 million that the mayor and the council allocated to the Board of Water Supply. So in total of $50.3 million. So just a big mahalo to those folks that helped to support providing funds from outside the Board of Water Supply to help with rate affordability for our customers. Thank you.
Thank you, Ernie. Thanks, Raylan. As we all know, the municipal water system is massive and diverse. The map that is before you illustrates the distribution of this year's design and construction projects around the island as we manage an island-wide municipal water system. These are the highlights for Category 1. As Raylan covered earlier, while the budget amount is $25 million, $10 million of that will be from the state for the exploratory and monitoring wells. Research and development begins with an appropriation for the drilling, casing, pumping, and testing of exploratory well at Newtown 550 as part of the Red Hill situation. We are also planning up to 10 monitoring wells to warn us of presence of underground fuel plumes for the Red Hill fuel contamination. And we continue with our construction management program that provides additional support for our capital projects construction management branch. Next, we have Category 2 to address the needs of an aging infrastructure. Again, while the budget number is $60 million, $5 million of that is potential federal funding for our Kahilinai and Aiea Heights Drive water system improvement project. This category includes projects to perform renovations and renewals to our aging facilities. This background and corner photo is of our Waihe'e Tunnel and Incline Wells Chlorinator area, which is our first project on the list. We also have Makakilo Booster number 1, electrical improvements or upgrades and facility projects. Our Kaanohe Booster number 2 motor control center replacement and facility repairs, our Kali High Service booster electrical upgrades, and our Hawaii Loa Booster Number 1 pump and MCC replacement project. Other renewal and replacement needs, includes our water main replacement, which I mentioned earlier with Kahilinai. We also have our Aiea Heights Drive water system improvement in Aiea, our Kakele Drive and Mohala Way water system improvements in Honolulu, and the Halupa Street water system improvements in Palava. And those are 1.54 miles of our water main replacement, which is less than our normal target that we were looking to reach in our 21 miles. This upcoming year was targeted for 12 miles, and we are going to be at 1.54 miles, again, mainly because of the development of new sources in light of the Red Hill situation. We have our corrosion repairs and controls for our granular activated carbon at our Mililani Wells 1. Also compliance with our State Department of Land and Natural Resources dam program, which is our Nuuanu Reservoir Number 1 dam improvements, and Anakuli 242 altitude valve replacement project. In fiscal 24, we continue to upkeep our reservoirs and other Board of Water Supply structures at our facilities around the island while continuing to upgrade security at our facilities. The photo on the right is our rehabilitation of Makaha Shaft Tunnel to get that back in line and to support our water needs. Our pump and renewal and replacement projects at Waipahu Wells 2, Waipahu Wells 4, Waianae Wells 2, and our Ainakoa well. Facility repair and renovations at our Hawaii Loa Booster Number 1, our Kulihi Pump Station, fire alarm upgrades, and Baratania HVAC upgrades. Security improvements at our Kaimuki Pump Station, which the photo is shown here, is one of our higher priorities due to issues related to this facility being open to other inviting or not inviting members of our community, and also at our Nuuanu Nursery and Kaloa Wells. Our capacity expansion, category 3, is our largest this year. While the budget number, again, is at $102 million, $30 million will be from the Department of Health's Clean Water State Revolving Fund for our East Kapolei 215 and Kualakai Parkway 16-inch recycled water main, $28 million in federal funding for the Kailailoa desalination, and 42-inch line. The project that is shown on this slide is our East Kapolei 215 and Kualakai Parkway 16-inch recyclable water main project. Also, we have Red Hill Contamination Response Production Well, which is at our Aiea 497, our Waialainui Well Environmental Assessment Project. Additional projects include construction of a new well source at our Ma'akua wells, as shown on the top right corner, design of our Honolulu District 42-inch main, which shows the alignment along Baratania through King Street to Eisenberg, and the design, build, and operate maintain contract at our Kailailoa seawater desalination facility. This concludes the highlights of this year's capital improvement program, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Also at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Barry Usagawa, our program administrator for Water Resources Division, who will go over the Kailailoa seawater desalination facility contract.
Thank you, Jadine, Mr. Chair and members. Okay, so this is the Kailailoa desalination project. We've awarded a contract for the design, construction, operation, and maintenance of the seawater desalination project. And this is going to be funded over several fiscal years. It's currently budgeted at 23, and there's for 18 million, and there's budget in the 24 CIP. I'm going to go over the benefits of the project, some of the facts, the conceptual plans, and the impacts and mitigation tied to seawater desalination. We're starting small with a capacity of 1.7 million gallons per day, expandable to 5. It's located on a 20-acre parcel in Campbell Industrial Park at the end of Olay Street, next to the drainage canal that drains the city of Kapolei. Osmalka is the PAR refinery. To the left is the state ag lot. Yeah, the feed lot. And then to the right is the Kalealoa Airport runway. So the facility is in the runway alignment, and there's a navigation easement. There's a height limit of the buildings. So the project will be below that. A parcel of land we got at no cost as a public conveyance from the closure of the Barbers Point Naval Air Station through their base realignment and closure process back in the late 90s, I guess. The land comes with a requirement to put it into its intended use. And we've gotten some extensions on that time frame because our conservation program and recycle water program has allowed us to minimize the amount of potable use in the Ewa district. But now it's water demand is increasing towards our system capacity, and we needed to proceed. The objective of the project is to develop a sustainable seawater desalination facility that supports the Ewa Development's planned directed growth policies, the secondary urban center of Kapolei, with a drought-proof, high-quality local water supply that is sustainable and enhances water resilience to climate change and reduces transfers from central Oahu. So we've been pumping water from Waipawa and Kune into Campbell Industrial Park, and this will replace it and would make that water available to Ewa's growth. We seek to ensure that the introduction of the new water supply into the distribution system there will cause no detrimental impact to the existing system assets or to the local customers, water systems, and their uses. By the way, I just wanted to say that the project is going to be located on the upper right-hand corner, the northeast portion of the parcel. There's an injection well that is planned to the left there along Olay Street, and has to be a quarter mile away from the source wells that are the two blue dots up in this area here. So the administration buildings and the process buildings and the tanks would be there. About 4 million gallons of salt water would be pulled up from the source wells, and will make 1.7 mg of fresh water. The brine concentrate would be injected into the injection well along Olay Street. And this whole area is an underground injection control area, so it's permittable. And there are two main environmental impacts from this project. One is the brine disposal. The other is the high power costs. So in the 20 acres, and we're only taking the upper right-hand corner, the 20 acres allows us to pursue a photovoltaic project in the future. We expect to apply and obtain additional federal grants for the renewable energy power system. Okay, so the final EIS was filed in 2008 with the Office of Environmental Quality Control. As part of the USPR grant that Ray is going to talk about, we updated the engineering feasibility study and financial capability determination. That has been completed, and USPR is working on a NEPA EA, environmental assessment, and expect a finding of no significant impact, tied with our final EIS that was done in 2008. And this will include section 106 archaeological inventory survey. So the site is undeveloped. There's a few archaeological sites that we need to be mindful of and protect them and monitor their construction so we don't impact them. The source water wells are deep, 1,600 and 2,000 feet deep. So that's the blue line here. The solid line is a solid pipe that cases off the cap rock formation, which is 1,000 feet thick, and open hole on the bottom. So we're pulling the salt water from the Waianae basalt, going through the process, and then we're injecting the brine into the cap rock. So the gray areas are the limestone cap rock. The brown area are the clay terrestrial and marine sediments layer. And there is a 100-foot thick clay layer at the intersection of the interface of the brown and the blue, basically at the caprock and basalt interface that is hydraulically separate. So the whole issue is if you pump salt water and inject the brine, we don't want it to recirculate back into the basalt and make the salt water saltier. So the geology allows us to put this all in the same site. Now the UIC is about a quarter mile west though. In terms of concentrate disposal, our consultant Intera did a groundwater model using USGS and well drilling logs. The brine is denser than salt water, so it's expected to sink down to the interface of the caprock and basalt layer. And because it's sloping at a 4% slope, because the island's on a slope, it'll flow out towards the ocean and get diluted there. But it will not come up into the nearshore waters because of the density, so it won't affect the benthic environment of the nearshore waters. The Ever Watershed Management Plan is a resource plan that describes the water supply options for climate resilience, integrating all of the natural and alternative water supplies and matching those supplies with the appropriate uses. So the domestic, industrial, landscaping, agriculture, traditional customary practices, and natural resource protection. Surface water is basically serving those two on the right. We have stormwater for agriculture and landscaping, golf course irrigation, desalted water primarily for Cameron Industrial Park. Of course, the recycled water is the largest in the state, providing about 8 MGD of recycled water for large landscape irrigation. Our conservation program is huge in EVA because of the new plumbing efficiency standards. And then the in-district and imported water that's currently serving EVA. One of the things I wanted to note is that desalination is cost comparable to if we were to develop a regional system, say in Wahiwa or North Shore, and put in all that 17 to 20 miles of pipeline up and over, pumping that same gallon of water 3 or 4 times as we lift it over the hill, drop it on the other side, is cost comparative to the desalination plant in terms of costs and infrastructure, operation and infrastructure costs. We currently rely on groundwater solely for drinking, hygiene, and sanitation, but we are facing these challenges in 3 areas as it relates to resources: climate change and the depletion of water supply from decreasing rainfall, and the regulatory actions that compensate for that decrease in rainfall in terms of reducing our sustainable yields in our aquifers and contamination events from Red Hill and most recently PFAS that may not allow us to pump water that we have from ground. So we did see a decrease in rainfall over, since I started in 1985, the sustainable yield was 495 on the island. It eventually went down to 465 in the late 90s. In the early 2000s, 446 million gallons for the island. And in 2019, 293.5. So in my short career, sustainable yield dropped about 100 million gallons just because of the decreasing rainfall that was experienced in that time frame. But when you look into the future, in these forecasted models from UH, through the dry scenario of the statistical downscaling and the wet scenario of dynamical downscaling, we see that in the red, potentially we could see a 65% decrease in rainfall by 2100. And this will, if that is our future, it'll reduce the sustainable yields in our aquifers and reduce the amount of water supply. So we need to look into diversifying our water supply to make it more resilient to climate change, and desalinated water will help meet EVA's growth in water demand and allow our sources to recover post-drought. So what climate change actually will do is make rainfall more variable. meaning that we'll have more intense droughts and more intense flooding. And you see the blue in the bottom right, East Honolulu is expected to see more flooding. When you see those extremes in an extreme drought, we have to hit our groundwater sources more heavily, of course, overlaid with a lot more conservation. But after the drought is over and it starts to rain again, it's important that we allow the aquifers to increase, to let it rest and recover. And desalination will help us reduce the amount of groundwater that we need to meet demand to allow our aquifers to recover. Okay, so last slide for me. That we did award the project. So design, build, operate, maintain. So they'll design it and build it and operate it for a 20-year period with 2 5-year extensions up to 30 years. The contract amount was 149.6 million and change. Fixed design build amount. The annual operating and maintenance fee is 2.7 million. The contractor is Kalaeloa Disaco LLC in partnership with Nordic PCL Construction Inc. And we awarded that in the late April. With that, I'll turn it over to Ray, who will talk about our financing strategy and the federal grants that we have.
Thank you, Barry. Okay, so right now, like we just showed you on the last slide, right? We recognize desalination is expensive, but we feel that we have a unique opportunity right now to reduce its cost impact to our ratepayers. We have the potentially a $19 million grant from the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, and we've already secured the $25 million of American Rescue Plan Act state and local fiscal recovery funds. So total grant funding for this project is $44 million so far. Also, as Barry mentioned earlier in the presentation, the land on which the plant will be built was provided at no cost. The USBR grant would come through this congressionally authorized Title 16 project under the Hawaii Resources Act, Water Resources Act of 2005. And that ARPA funding, it does have a time limit on it. The federal government gave out the American Rescue Plan monies and expect that they will all be expended by 2026. And as you saw on the prior slide, this project aligns very nicely with that, with expected completion in 2026. We are also exploring a WIFIA loan, which is a low interest and flexible financing source for this project. And just to frame this or put it into comparison, in Southern California, they're also pursuing a similar desalination project. I guess their plant will produce about as much as ours will, and their cost is at about $140 million. So in summary, our operating fund, operating budget appropriation that we're requesting the board appropriate is 241.7-ish million. And the capital improvement program budget is at 212.6 million for a total appropriation by the board of $454.3 million. And if you have any questions for us, we're here and happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for the report. Very comprehensive. Members, any questions? Okay, hearing none, I'd like to see if there is any public testimony.
Oh, Chair,
Okay, anyone downstairs or Mr.
no one's here to testify on this item.
Okay, and Mr. Nordstrom, any remote testimony? No remote testimony. All right, thank you. All right, if there's no further questions, I'm closing the public hearing. All right, public hearing is now closed. We are now in our regular meeting. I'm going to take it out of order. Item number 4 of items requiring board action is, related to the public hearing we just held, is the adoption of resolution number 966/2023 for the adoption of the operating and capital improvement program budget for the fiscal year 2023 to 2024 and appropriating funds therefore. Chair recognizes Ms. Raylene Nakabayashi, although is there anything further, or should we just take a vote on this?
No, not much, nothing. Sorry, we have the letter, which is essentially recapping the appropriation that we requested during the public hearing, the 241.7 million operating fund appropriation for the operating budget, 212.6 million for the CIP appropriation. This reso should read like the resos you've seen before. The only, be it further resolved that I'd like to call attention to is, I think that we acknowledge that these budgets as appropriated may result in temporary deviation from financial policies previously adopted by the board, namely to establish that target requirement of having never having less than 60 days of working capital. As we talked about, as we contend with our inflationary pressures that have outpaced our revenue growth, these budgets do reflect the possibility of having less than minimum 60 days of working capital cash on hand. The board recognizes that the reserve of working capital was designated for the purpose of addressing economic and revenue downturns and emergency situations, such that the reserve of working capital could be accessed when required, to ensure continued operations and capital expenditures. So that is different from the prior year resos that this board has adopted. But yeah, that was the only thing I think I would bring up that is new. And I think also attached in your board packet, if you need it, was the affidavit of the public hearing notice from May 11th. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Before I call for a motion. I have a question. I don't know if I asked it previously. Given that we're gonna be going under the minimum 60 days of working capital, how will our bonds, how will they view this?
I think and I'll ask maybe Joe Cooper to respond to that question. So Joe, if you're monitoring our waterworks controller, but so the way we look at it is this is unencumbered cash that we have that we can use for emergencies and other things that we encounter. The way that's calculated by the bond rating agencies is slightly different. So right now, I think the bond rating agencies, they won't see a dip below 60 days. They're actually looking at it staying higher.
Okay, well, it's just a question, and I know it's we're not necessarily going under the 60 days of working capital. But it's just I guess recognizing the possibility given the budget that we may need to
At times,
momentarily
Yeah.
at times go below the 60 days of working capital on hand, which we as a board had adopted previously as a financial standard, which I think helped us get to the bond rating that we have today.
yeah, I think it may have been one of the factors considered, although I think the calculation by the rating agencies indicates that our cash on hand is much larger. So more days than what way we calculated. But the other part about this provision is to make it clear with the board that if we never dip below 60 days, that means the $30 million that we set aside for emergencies, we can never use for emergencies. So the ability to temporarily be able to take it down and go back below 60 days, then bring it back up later, allows us to actually use this fund for the purposes it was originally intended to. Joe, are you there?
Hold on, yes. Hi, yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Mr. Cooper, my question is, given that the resolution that we're about to vote for has a provision that will reflect the possibility of having less than the minimum 60 days of working capital cash on hand, I'm wondering what effect, if any, might that have on our bond rating?
Well, in my opinion, it won't have an effect. I mean, obviously, that is one of the factors that that bond rating agencies look at. But also they look at, our management in general, that this fund was established, to help stabilize rates, which is what we're doing. And also that they also look very favorably on the board's willingness, I guess, to adjust or to raise rates. And as we're going into a new rate setting policy, they will, factor that willingness into their rating presentation or their rating decisions.
Joe, was the threshold higher before?
The
The
threshold,
threshold, 60 days, was that higher before?
well, actually, I believe before 2018, the threshold was 45 days. So when we adopted the new financial policies, we increased the minimum amount of days of cash on hand.
Okay, so it went up, okay,
So it's between 60 to 180 days.
yeah, okay. So it went higher.
And we also have other financial tools to help alleviate, any cash shortages should a dire emergency or a disaster approach.
I guess before I call for a motion, I would like to note, for the record and, for the public, in advance of our upcoming rate study, which I hope will commence forthwith. I note that, the fuel, one of the drivers in our budget in making it, less, I mean, on the expense side, driving the expense side is fuel. A good percentage of our budget includes, electricity costs. And we are absorbing that cost and not passing on. We have absorbed that cost and not passed it on to our ratepayers. However, there might come a time, and that time may be sooner than later, but we have to consider a fuel adjustment surcharge to be able to better manage our budget and operations. I do want to thank the department for enduring various budget cuts during this time. We hope that we're able, with this new rate study, we'll be able to better fund the department, given the new needs that's on hand. I also want to note that for the last 4 or 5 years, I believe, we've had rate increases every year. Small rate increases, but we have them every year. We are having a reprieve this year. There's no rate increases coming up in June. In the meantime, we are facing increased costs because of Red Hill having to develop new sources and to develop, increase redundancies within our delivery system. Meanwhile, our infrastructure continues to age, and like everyone else, we're dealing with inflation. So as we come up on this rate study, I hope that ratepayers, public will be understanding to any difficult decisions we may have to make. Thank you. I'd like to entertain a motion to accept and approve resolution number 966, 2023, adopting the operating and capital improvement program budget for the fiscal year 2023, 2024, and appropriating funds.
So second.
Okay, thank you. Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Just one quick one. When we do have the discussion on the rate, is there some way to balance the electricity, cost as opposed to the rate decrease? I mean, kind of showing whether, I'm just, here's my train of thought really quick, is that would it be easier to raise the charge more for, because of electricity cost? Or would it be better to go with the rate increase or maybe a combination of both? Anyway, that's for discussion. I'm just saying, when we do come up for discussion, if we could have,
Yeah, well,
you know, some kind of a table or something to take a look at that.
we'll talk about the options because there exists already some tools in the rate structure
Okay.
to kind of, because you don't know where fuel prices might go in the future. It could go up, it could go down.
Well, just to make so one can make an intelligent decision in terms of balancing the two.
Yeah, so what we propose to do is actually bring this, the proposed rates and some ideas about rates
Okay.
and to the board next month. And actually have the board provide some guidance on direction and what we should, proposal we should take out to the community, to engage the community.
Okay, thank you.
We'll make sure we cover the fuel part.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks.
Any other comments or questions?
Maybe just a comment, Mr. Chair, understanding that this year especially, you know, shifting down all this water has kind of upended the way in which the board has traditionally looked at CIP. I think it's important to note that there's a cost to all of this, which is the coming down to 1.5 miles of pipe replacement for the year, and then would hope that we can work our way back up in subsequent budgets as we go.
And not forget.
No, we're not gonna forget.
And I agree wholeheartedly. I agree wholeheartedly.
I mean, there's just different indicators as to how impactful Red Hill has been, and I think that the number coming down is one of them, in this mad dash to look for new water resources that are further away from Red Hill.
Yeah, thank you, Nale, the challenge I see is that we have to make sure, first of all, we have enough water to put in the pipes. That means enough source capacity. Or else the pipes, will be carrying water, but there won't be any additional water for growth or other needs. We have to kind of rebuild that, sort of that redundancy and cushion there on the source. And then get right back to the replacing the pipelines and our road to 21 miles a year. So that, that is, so I'm in agreement with you, David. I just want to make sure there's enough water in the pipes.
And maybe the bright side is that if this builds a connection back to federal dollars that help us to pay for it, we don't have to lay it on the ratepayers themselves to pay.
Yes, clearly the way forward for the Board of Water Supply from now on is to be more aggressive in seeking external sources of funds that don't come from the checkbooks and pocketbooks of our customers only through water rates. Because on the other side, we're balancing then affordability for our customers and some of the most customers that are facing some of the greatest challenges.
Okay, if there's no further comments or questions, I'll call for the question. Madam Secretary, roll call vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. Board Member Maxwell.
Aye.
Board Member Nale Anthony.
Aye.
Board Member Jonathan Kanashiro.
Aye.
Board Member Ed Sniffen.
Aye.
Board Member Warren Mamisuko.
Aye.
And Chair Brian Daya.
Aye,
Chair, motion passes with 6 ayes.
thank you. Let the record so reflect. All right, let's go back to the top of the agenda now. We have the approval of the minutes of the public hearing and regular meeting held on April 24th, 2023. I'd like to entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Is there any corrections, adjustments, amendments? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. All right, the unanimous passes unanimously. Minutes of April 24th, 2023 are approved. Item number 2, we have the approval of the minutes of the budget workshop meeting that we held on May 15, 2023. I'm going to defer this item to the next month. On item number 3, we have the adoption of resolution number 965, 2023. This is for the acceptance of gift to the Board of Water Supply from Hawaiian Earth Products in support of the 2023 annual Palava Xeriscape Garden Open House and Unthirsty Plant Sale. Chair recognizes Ms. Kathleen Pahino.
Mahalo, Chair and board members. Appreciate it. We recommend the adoption of resolution number 965, 2023, acceptance of gift to the Board of Water Supply from Hawaiian Earth Products in support of our 2023 annual Halava Xeriscape Garden Sale on August 5th. The amount of the donation is $1,350. The BWS's annual Halava Xeriscape Garden Open House and Unthirsty Plant Sale is a well-established, successful public outreach program. It educates Oahu residents about the importance of outdoor water conservation and sustainable gardens. Studies show that more than 30% of residential water use occurs outdoors, so it makes sense for the BWS to promote water-saving methods in this area, which in turn can reduce the customer's combined water and wastewater bill. This donation from Hawaiian Earth Products allows the BWS to give free compost to plant sale visitors and encourage them to incorporate into their own home gardens some of the techniques they learn at the event. We deeply appreciate the continued support of this board, and we hope you will support this donation. And if you come to the plant sale, love to have you come and help us fill bags. Ernie always comes and helps us fill bags of compost every year. So.
It's one of my duties. The plant sale is going to be the first time, I think, in person since the
In
pandemic.
about 3 years.
Can you tell us when it will?
August 5th.
August 5th.
Yes.
And I want to thank the Hawaii Earth Products for the generous donation. Yeah, we really appreciate it.
They've been supporters for many, many years. We really appreciate it. Thank you, board.
Thank you.
All right, members, any questions?
Just comment.
Yes.
Chair, I have a affiliation, abstain.
Okay, thank you very much for the disclosure. Let the record so reflect. Any further questions? If not, let's take a roll call vote, please.
Board Member Maxwell,
Aye.
Board Member Nale Anthony,
Aye.
Dante Conchero,
Abstain.
Board Member Ed Sniffen,
I,
Board Member Warren Mamizuka,
Aye.
and Chair Brandon Diane.
Aye.
Chair, motion passes with 5 ayes and 1 abstention.
Okay, thank you for that.
Chair, if I could ask the board secretary a question, because I want to make sure, because it's very important. Joy, on item number 4, who made the motion and who was the second?
For item 4,
Let's see it.
Yeah, I second.
Okay, Max made the motion.
Max
Second.
moved, and then it was seconded by John.
Sorry, just wanted to make sure, because this is a very important decision by the board. And all decisions are important. That was really important.
Okay, so resolution number 965, 2023 is hereby approved. We accept a gift from Hawaiian Earth Products. Please convey our thanks to Hawaiian Earth Products for their many years of support. And please save the date, August 5th, 2023, for the annual Palava Xeriscape Garden Open House and Unthirsty Plant Sale.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move now to the items for information. First up is an update on the Board of Water Supply's response to the potential impacts of the Red Pill fuel contamination. Chair recognizes Ms. Joyce Lin.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, board members. I'll be providing an update on the recent events and action items in relation to Red Hill. Okay, this past month, we had a full calendar as usual, meeting with different agencies and entities. Some items to note, the document on the right is the unified statement on Red Hill. The signed statement represents our state and city leaders, including the Board of Water Supply, our unified goal to preserve access to safe and clean water for our people. It is our commitment to cooperate across all government levels and agencies and to hold the Navy accountable on remediation of our aquifer. On May 5th, the long-awaited investigation report and videos on the event of November 29, 2022 was released by Joint Task Force, Red Hill. This is the incident in which 1,300 gallons of AFFF concentrate was released from the Red Hill bulk fuel storage facility. One troubling information that we found through the report was that there were previous AFFF releases prior to the November 2022 event. One of them was in December 2019, and the second was on September 2020. Along with Board Member Anthony, we met with EPA on a Red Hill groundwater dashboard that they are currently developing. It is similar in aesthetically and features as the Navy's groundwater dashboard that I presented last month. It has functions where the user can filter out information by the sampling location, analytes and detections, etc. Following the meeting, we compiled a comment letter to EPA Region 9's Regional Administrator, Martha Guzman, on our recommendations and suggestions to refine this tool. We also had meetings with the Navy and Army, and we took the opportunity to reiterate the importance of data and information sharing, whether it be the oil spills, the releases, or the PFAS releases. We would like to have that information in a timely manner. We again requested to sample at the Red Hill shaft and the Navy's installed monitoring wells. And we also requested that the Navy to begin PFAS sampling on all their monitoring wells around the Red Hill fuels facility. On defueling, the Navy provided an updated defueling plan, supplemental 2, last week. The defueling timeline is now shifted forward and is scheduled to start October 16 of this year and finish by January 19 next 2024. This is earlier than the initial timeline, where defueling was scheduled to finish June 2024. However, part of their media release statement said that at the end of the defueling on January 19, there will be potentially 100 to 400,000 gallons of fuel remaining in the tanks. The Navy is holding an open house tomorrow night and Wednesday night at the Ke'ihi Lagoon to address questions and comments on this. And Rear Admiral John Wade, who is the Joint Task Force, who is in charge of Joint Task Force on defueling, offered Manager Lau to meet with his technical team to discuss why there will be fuel remaining in the tanks in the coming weeks. So hopefully when we do meet, I'll have more information on the discrepancy to provide an update for you folks next month. On closure, the status on closure of Red Hill facility remains the same. However, during some of the meetings that we had with different agencies, they told us that there will be some updates on the closure plan coming up this month, end of this month. On PFAS, the EPA's proposed drinking water regulation on the 6 PFAS chemicals is still accepting public comments until the end of this month. We were informed that the site investigation report on Hawaii National Guard's Waialva Gulch training site is finalized. Based on their findings, they are moving forward with a remedial investigation. And last month, the Board of Water Supply also notified the DOH, Department of Health, and the public that we had a PFAS detection at our Ka'amilo wells. This station serves the area from Palimomi Street to Halawa District Park area. The chemicals were detected as part of our PFAS testing program and were detected at levels below the EPA's recently proposed MCLs. And we will continue to test and monitor for any changes and provide that update in a timely manner for everybody to know. In anticipation of emerging contaminants impacting our aquifer, the Board of Water Supply is seeking additional professional services to assess and monitor the potential impacts of these contaminants. All interested and qualified providers are welcome to submit an EOI, and their SOQs or Statement of Qualifications through our online procurement portal. Deadline for submittal is this Friday. And lastly, for upcoming events, as mentioned earlier, tomorrow, May 23rd, and Wednesday, the 24th, the Navy is holding their defueling open house at the Ke'ehi Lagoon Memorial Park. And in June, we have the Fuel Tank Advisory Committee meetings at the Moanalua High Schools. This concludes my update. I'll be on standby for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the report. I believe we do have a,
If I, Chair, if I could just thank Joyce for her excellent report.
excellent, yeah.
Thank you.
I do believe we have a public testimony on this item. And I believe Ms. Pacola Davis is here to testify. She has submitted written testimony that has been circulated to all of you. Chair recognizes Ms. Pacola Davis.
Hi, everybody. Susan Pacola Davis. As I predicted, I would probably be testifying on supplement 2, which I am. I suggest that any of you that are really interested in knowing what's going to happen, read these 24 pages. I'm just going to go through a few of the red flags that I got when I was reading this. One of the things that are very important is the spill prevention, control, and countermeasures plan. And they're not going, Navy isn't going to provide the final until August 1st. So you got to look at this as that's the piece that's missing, because it's going to incorporate everything inside of this report. Many things were mentioned in the report about recommendations to fix things, and they never listed what the recommendations were. So, you know, my curious brain would always want that. Additional supplements as needed to comprehensively address all additional actions necessary to ensure removal of all fuel from Red Hill. So don't think that 2 is the last supplement you're going to see. And I'm looking forward to number 3 also. Just to bring attention to some of the things that they brought up, okay? They're going to be doing emergency spill response planning, but they gave us 7 scenarios. And the first one is most likely release in the tank gallery. The next one is most likely release in the LAT piping. So when I see those words, I'm like, does that mean we should expect that to happen? And inside the document, it tells you what they're going to do if either of those happen. And then another one is release into the harbor tunnel. Tank overfill. But the most dangerous release is defueling. And they give enough information to kind of tell you what they're going to do. But this is a scary thought, because the Red Hill Joint Task Force estimates that in the worst case scenario, 4.3 million gallons of fuel would be discharged over 30 hours. Okay? And anything else I want to touch up? Oh, the fire suppression AFFF line is supposed to be not in use and not predicted to be in use. But there is one piece in here, and I'm just going to tell you that I'm going to perk your curiosity to read it, that says, unless regulators tell us that we have to use that line for AFFF. How do you switch that fast? I don't know. Did I make it? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Colo Davis, for your testimony. Are there, any other testifiers today? Okay, Mr. Nordstrom, anybody on the line or waiting remotely?
No one waiting.
Thank you. All right, members, any questions?
I have a quick question, Joyce. You know, on the scenarios they talk about after they refuel it, you know, what they plan to do with it. Is any of it, is one of the scenarios to tear the tanks out?
That would be part of the closure plan. So there are 4 alternatives.
Yeah.
And there were, I think, option for,
Yeah, because I would think that's the only way you can figure out what the hell you have with it, by removing it, so, okay, I just wanted to, thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions or comments?
Just to let the board know too, this is Ernie, the manager. The plan was released, this is on the defielding plan supplement 2. But it didn't, they didn't release any of the enclosures. So we made a request, going up to even the Assistant Secretary of the Navy to get copies of the enclosures. So it's difficult to evaluate the full plan and to provide comments on it. We only see the front end of it, but the details are in the enclosures. So that's why I've reached out already to Admiral Wade. He's called me on that. We're having a meeting with Brigadier General Michelle Link, and she's going to meet with us face to face. I'm still going to press for them releasing the enclosures to us. Thank you.
Okay, members, any comments? Okay, if not, thank you very much for the report. Next up, item for information number 2 is the Capital Improvement Program quarterly update. Chair recognizes Ms. J.D. Urasaki.
Afternoon, Chair Andaya and board members again. This is the quarterly report for the Capital Improvement Program for all divisions for quarter ending March 31st, 2023. In the third quarter of fiscal year 2023, 6 contracts were awarded, totaling just over $37 million. And the details, as you can see here, also on here, there were no design or construction contracts that were closed. So this is the details of the 6 contracts that were awarded in the third quarter. And on the next slide gives you the graphical update that includes this for this current third quarter in black at 27%. And that concludes our update for the end of the third quarter. We still have this fourth quarter that we are working on. And I'm here for any questions you may have.
Members, any questions? Mr. Urasaki, can you refresh our recollection? Fiscal year 2022. We ended the year with a 65% execution. I know there was something I don't know if we put the rest towards this year. Can you refresh our recollection what we discussed on that?
Yes, so in fiscal year 22, the pipeline projects were deferred to fiscal year 23.
Okay, are some of those, and we're catching up from some of those.
So that's majority of them are in that fiscal year 23, in this update, in this third quarter update.
I see. So if we expend all the funds that are budgeted for fiscal year 2023, and we catch up fiscal year 2022, we'll have a greater than 100% execution.
I believe we will not have a greater than 100% execution because in the previous board meeting, we are canceling, we did cancel one of our pipeline projects.
Yeah.
And that'll be deferred to another fiscal year.
I see, okay. Okay,
So minus that. Yeah.
Out of curiosity, just, I don't wanna get too much in the weeds, but I'm just curious with, for example, this Palolo WSI Part 3 project. Budgeted 10 million, awarded 17. You know, is it just oversized or something? As far as why there's a big discrepancy?
So we're seeing, again, there are dynamics in terms of the whole post-pandemic, in terms of material costs and shortage supplies.
Oh,
And so it's,
yeah, wow. Yeah, I was just curious, out of curiosity.
How does it work when something is contracted and then the supply chain goes all crazy and the cost of the goods goes up like that? They gotta come back and just say the price changed?
so that would be on the contractor.
They gotta cover it.
They would have to cover it.
So what we're allowing them to do is actually advance order
Yeah,
materials, but they are responsible to store it and maintain the quality of that material, but we'll pay them when we receive the materials on it. So that was in some of the bids that are going out this year. It wasn't in the bids last year.
mm,
But that is some of the challenges that I think everybody's facing.
Thank you for the report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next we have the status update of groundwater levels at all index stations. Chair recognizes Mr. Barry Fusagal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. For this month, we have 4 aquifer index stations in low groundwater condition. They're Kaimuki, Pro City, and Punaluu are in caution. So Punaluu has come out of alert. Wailua is just in alert. The production for April is 125 million gallons per day. That's because we had a lot of rain over the last couple of weeks there. The rainfall index was 150% normal. 5-month moving average is 111%. So anything over 100% is a good thing for water resources. The drought monitor shows 0 drought conditions. The National Weather Service is forecasting below normal rainfall between July and November. So the latter part of this year is expected to be a little drier. Other than that, most monitor wells are stable. The average for April is lower than the last year at the same time and lower than the 5-year monthly average. So we're in good shape for water resources. And that's my report.
Members, any questions? Moving on to the next item for information. We have the water main repair report for April 2023. Chair recognizes Mr. Jason Nikaido.
This is the water main repair report for April 2023. We had 35 main breaks in April, which is higher than previous years and gives us a total of 297 breaks this fiscal year. Despite having a higher month, we are still comparable to previous years, as you can see in the bottom graph. This is a list of the 35 main breaks, the smaller 6 to 12-inch diameter pipes. This is a leak detection report for April. The leak detection team investigated 17 points of interest for 226 total year to date. And of those 28 leaks they found, 4 of them were on mains. So 4 catastrophic main breaks were prevented. That concludes my report.
Members, any questions? For your leak detection team,
Yes,
number of vacancies?
there are no vacancies. We are working on adding additional positions.
Which is what Ms. Nakabayashi reported earlier.
Yes. Also, when we get the new Utilis satellite leak detection contract up to date too, we'll get a refreshed look at the potential leaks out there, because right now we're working off of old data. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, that brings us to the end of our regular agenda. If I could have a motion to enter into executive session.
So moved.
second,
Okay, moved and seconded to go to executive session. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. Let's stand in recess while we prepare for executive session.